Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to our latest webinar with Herman Mashaba, the founder and president of ActionSA, a gentleman that needs very little introduction. Herman, if you could just perhaps put on your camera and unmute yourself, I'm going to introduce you to our members. I'm going to be joined by my colleagues Ema in Mission Control, who will be running some polls for us, and Cecilia will join us as and when you have questions. Herman's very bravely and decently offered to answer any questions we have for him. I know some have been submitted already, which we will be sharing. And indeed, feel free to use the Q&A function to pose any questions that you're inspired to ask, and Cecilia will feed those into Herman throughout the session. So Herman, we are living in interesting times. We have Trump in the White House. We have the Black Lives Matter movement that we're feeling the impact of globally, and we're seeing some real kind of transformative incidents on the sports field of the UK and the States. We see massive inequality in the world. South Africa having the highest Gini coefficient, the most uneven society in the world. The environment, we have fires around the world, but equally, the environment we live in from an ecological perspective. And we're also battling with COVID. And we have depression levels of market contraction around the world. If there ever was a time for leadership, it was now. The era of action is upon us. What does that mean to you, Herman? Please introduce and tell us about your organization, your vision, and what that era of action means and requires from us.
Thank you, Leon, and thank you to the British Chamber of Commerce for really inviting me to really talk to your members. It is really a privilege that I don't really take lightly, because it's an important engagement, at an appropriate time of my country's history. The role that the British business has played in this country cannot really be underestimated and should not really be underestimated. And it's a kind of relationship that I would personally like to see grow from strength to strength, because there's really so much that we are independent of each other. There's just no way that South Africa can ever think of isolating itself from our British history, which has really played an important role in our country's history. Some of it bad, but mostly really wonderful. Because one thing, I'm a realist in life. What is perfect in life? I don't go around looking for perfection in human beings, because I'm not perfect myself as Herman Mashaba. I'm a human being. I'm fallible. We make mistakes somewhere along the line. What I think for me it's important is when you make the mistake, it's not a deliberate mistake. And I think if I look at the history and the relationship between the British and South Africa, from my own perspective, I'll just really give you a little bit of context, Leon. When I was at university during Margaret Thatcher's time, we had in the US, we had I used to believe, Margaret Thatcher, to me, with the support of, at the time, I was an impression that Margaret Thatcher and this government were supportive of the apartheid government. But obviously, as a university student, you don't understand some of the dynamics. And later on, when I got to really know what political situation we were facing, was quite interesting. But right now, I think let's really talk about today. I think it's, I'm talking to you and your members on the day that is actually, for me, a shame for me as a South African. Firstly, if I look at what has been happening in my country since yesterday morning, with the destruction of businesses, with no consequences whatsoever, television screens, everything. Yeah. But at the same time, the question I'm asking is, do we still as a country have law enforcement agencies? Why are people not being arrested? I mean, we've experienced looting of state resources. We are known as a country of the most unequal society in the world. We are known to be the murder capital. We are known to be the rape capital of the world. And now look at what has happened yesterday. No single arrest. In a country where today, just a few hours ago, we received Stats SA contraction of our economy. You know, yesterday we were obviously debating this matter. We were thinking the economy's contraction will be between 45 and 49%. I was shocked a few hours ago to see that 51%.
Yeah.
What does this say to us as a country? We're in big trouble. And you can imagine an economy that's contracting at 51%. And you look at it, this is not just in isolation. This is the fourth quarter of contraction. So we started actually seeing negative growth before to COVID. So COVID just really put a stamp on it. And we've got a government that's actually not looking this as a crisis. In fact, they're looking this as an opportunity to loot even further. So I think as a South African, looking at the unemployment rate, where by the time COVID hit us, we were sitting at just 10.5 million unemployed South Africans, 39%. We've already lost 3 million people within the last 4 months. We are expecting to lose another 4 million. So basically what's scary about South Africa is that by the end of this year, we're going to have more unemployed South Africans than employed. I mean, it's a scary situation. Where I grew up, I was born and raised, Leon, people who did not work in the 70s and 80s are those who did not want to work. South Africa was actually short of labor. That's where I grew up. Were people being paid decent salaries? Absolutely not. I was brought up by my sisters who were working for one of the factories in Babelegi, but they could walk. It was 15, 20 minutes walk from the factory, working from our home to work to a factory, earning 3 rents a week. But there was unity, there was dignity in our families. I respected my sisters because they provided Fridays. They will be able to really buy the little grocery that they worked for. I respected them because they were working. Today, we've got kids in this country, big number of them, of black youth, 15, 20 years. They've never seen a single parent wake up in going to work. Yeah. You can ask him, big number, huge number of our youth. They've never seen a single parent waking up to go to work in 15 to 20 years. So we've got the real huge crisis. And that is why I think I had to then say to myself as a businessman, and fortunately enough, I started my business at the age of 22 when it was illegal, not fashionable. It was illegal for me to start business at the time. And I decided to PW Port and the National Party are not going to determine my destiny, and decided I'm going to do it anyway. I had nothing to lose. And and I've now given my life to contribute to saving South Africa. And that's what ActionSA is about. It's actually, our project is to save South Africa. It is our last chance.
So Herman, I think that's going to resonate with a lot of our members. And here at the Chamber, you know, our role is to represent our member businesses and to help them grow and to advise and create an environment where businesses can grow. And you raise a lot of points that I'm sure we'll come on to when we explore your manifesto. But I'm thinking conceptually, you made reference to Thatcher, and as a British Chamber of Commerce, obviously she's a figure that is very divisive in the UK. But there were similar challenges at the time of Thatcher. When she came to power, the UK was requesting funding from the IMF. We had a 3-day week. We had generations of joblessness and worklessness. And a big challenge of her was actually taking on the trade union movement and creating an environment where businesses could grow. And the IMF insisted that we could conform to that. We've experienced some IMF lending here. Do you see under the current regime that there will be some structural shifts, some policy shifts that are going to enable our members as businesses to grow? And a few topics that have come up. Mobility of talent. Visas are very, very difficult, you know, to bring people in. I saw you mention around special economic zones to give incentives for people to grow businesses. It has been said that it's quite prohibitive labor law in terms of starting up. There's a lot of bureaucracy and it can take between 2 months and 2 years to get the relevant paperwork. If we want to take action, and by being a member of the Chamber in our community, we want to take action because we believe that by growing businesses, we can create dignity, people that can be proud in their work, but they can support themselves and their families through work. what action can we take and what action are you proposing to take so that we can create this better economic environment where we can attract foreign direct investment, but equally grow entrepreneurs like yourself here in South Africa?
Look, you know, Leon, studies have been done over many years, and I think for any country to really develop, you don't really develop an economy by using force. It has never worked where you use force. Ask the Russians or what they tried to do from 1917. Ask the Chinese what they tried to do after the Second World War. The only way...
Maybe if I jump in there, sorry to interrupt, but that's the conversation we had with Minister Mbawini, who was saying that there are people still trying to run a Soviet-style controlled economy in 2020, when it was proven in 1989 that that didn't work. Is that what we're living and experiencing right now?
Well, that's where I'm going, because unfortunately we are led by people who were trained by the Soviets. You remember when the ANC and the liberation movements in this country started going out in the early 60s. The only help they could get was from the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union, actually South Africa was really one of the prime countries that they wanted, and wanted desperately. Mm-hmm. Desperately. That's how the formation of the South African Communist Party comes from the days of Stalin. In fact, it's when because South Africa was a key area for the Soviets looking at this country. And that's why they were the only ones who supported what was happening when our people went out. And given the kind of training that they received, and the type of training that the ANC government has received from the Soviet, it's about state control, it's about murder. Fortunate enough, we're still protected, because one thing that the communists have done and have done spectacularly is mass murder. You know, ask Stalin or ask Mao, ask, you know. So basically, that's what an economic system that they've been trained was for them to control. Keep people poor, don't give them the right type of education so that you can control them. And look at what has happened. Today, talk to any South African of my age and even slightly less who were brought up under the apartheid. 1976, the youth of Soweto started the revolution fighting against Bantu education, which was not the right education like our white counterparts were getting. Go into the townships today. 26 years into our democracy, 80% of public schools in this country are dysfunctional. We've got today, there's a media contingent in Tembisa, here in Gauteng, a school built, 82 million rands, built since 2017. It cannot really be occupied. How they build it, nobody cared, because it's this government is not really about public service. For them, everything is an opportunity. That's why when whoever was given the tender to build the school, they didn't care. What they cared about is how much he was going to make and how much he was going to provide. I mean, he was going to share with the comrades, and how much he was going to provide. He was going to support the ANC. So that is their thinking. That's why COVID-19, the regulations, nothing to do with the economy. That's why you can see big stores being destroyed. Where have you had the president? We must be the only country in a civilized world where you can have this massive disruption of the economy, and the president is nowhere to be found. I mean, a matter like this needed the president to actually have a press conference and ensure that all the people who are behind this, get the police, go after them, go and put them behind bars. Where's our president? He's nowhere to really be found. So,
coming in there, and I love the passion, and actually it's really great we're going to have a very real conversation about the state of the nation. In the interest of balance, I'm a British citizen. I'm a proud South African resident. I'm not hugely proud of the way my government is leading us through this crisis in the UK at the moment. I can't vote in this country. I'm a guest in your country, so I want to contribute to solving a problem without necessarily overly criticizing the country that hosts me, as a lot of our members will be. But that means we will not ignore or comment on what might be perceived to be a lack of leadership. but I don't think it's unique to South Africa. I think the leadership in America has been incredibly poor. I think the leadership in the UK has been poor. South Africa, it's more critical because we were already experiencing economic contractions, and COVID was like a punch in the face to us. And there's a great expression that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And then you really see how people respond and react. So given the current context, given our current constitution, given the way constituencies work or don't work, and given the under-education you outline in certain communities in Tembisa, Mamelodi, but the rural communities, how is your organization, the 51st party on the ballot box, going to make an impact in terms of being a challenging, credible opposition? Because as an individual, you have credibility as a businessman, as a leader, as a mayor, as a role model. But how can your organization now challenge, as a credible opposition, to hold this government accountable to address some of these challenges?
Leon, I think good question. I think the starting point for us, how we evolved into a political party, was through engagement of South Africans through the People's Dialogue, and conceived 5 core values, non-negotiable 5 values, which are really very crucial. And I think let me just really deal with one: electoral reform. We are committing as South Africans, without the constitutional changes, because it's going to take Parliament a long time if ever they will change it. We are committing to South Africans and to the British community that we are going to take back the power. We're coming out with something revolutionary, where we take, with immediate effect, our party is going to force to take power back from politicians and give it to civil society. Well, how are we going to do this? We're going to do it through primaries. Our public representatives of ActionSA are not going to be elected by us as a political party behind closed doors. So what we are going to do in preparations for our local government elections next year, everywhere where we're going to contest, and obviously for now we committed to contest in the 3 metros, that's Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, and Johannesburg. But we are still going to consider others, but we are not going to contest in all 278 municipalities. It's humanly not possible for us to put something together, because we want to contest in municipalities where we're going to win. We don't want to play second fiddle. We want to contest to win. So basically what we are going to do is our public representatives to be a ward councillor. It's not going to be our party that decides who become a ward councillor for my area. So what we will do, we invite our members who are interested to be in every ward. If you want to be a ward councillor, we will then present them to society. Go out and campaign, whether 2 or 3 months or so. We will have our own elections, our own primaries, where the community must decide Leon is the best man to represent our community, because we know him, we live with him. Yeah. Let him be the one representing our party in council. No man, we will do this, including when we go to national government. You're not going to be the president or the member of parliament being elected by us. So this is quite a revolutionary in South African context, because why, Leon, it's important to really run this. I'm sure you're aware, we had 18.5 million South Africans who did not vote the last election, as compared to 17.5. So ANC is not in government because of people who voted for it in power. People sometimes tend to want to blame people who are voting for ANC. It's only just over 9 million people voted. So what we are saying as a party, our key market are the 19 million South Africans. And fortunate enough, a big number of people who engaged us to start a political party, because for us to start this political party, ActionSA, was informed by working with South Africans who gave us the mandate, 2.4 million South Africans. No political party in this country has started a political party with the official mandate of 2.4 million South Africans. Even before we launched the party, last week when we were launching the party, a few days before the launch, we had already registered 60,000 volunteers prepared. And right now, as I'm talking to you in the inner city in Soweto, I can take you to go and see what our ground forces are doing in mobilizing the communities. People are putting their own money. Fortunately enough, my family put in the main money to really get this machine to move. But communities, some of them unemployed with the little that they make, making sure that we drive the free market economy. So for you right now, that's why I accepted talking to the British Chamber and other chambers. I want the businesses to understand that you are not going to be adversaries to us. We actually, because I know business, coming from a business environment, you know, normal person will invest in a hostile environment. So the only way we can attract investment into South Africa, it means we've got to really have a red carpet for you. We've got to protect.
Yeah.
We've got to protect.
It's interesting having set up a couple of businesses here and in other countries. Here, you really have to fight to prove you really want to stay here, whereas other countries roll the red carpet out for you and give you an experience to invite your investment.
Let me give you a practical example of what we're going to do, and articulated this, expressed this during the launch. You know, South Africa, we're the only country in the world with a massive industrial area all over the country. Hammanskraal, Ga-Rankuwa, Kotwa in the Free State, and all over the country. We're the only country with massive factories. But what are those factories? They are relatively new by world standards, built during the dark days of this country with the homeland system. Used to employ millions, not millions of our people. Where today you go into those areas where I grew up, where, as I said to you earlier on, when I grew up, people who did not work were those who did not want to work. Go to Hammanskraal today, go to Ga-Rankuwa today, 80% unemployment. But you've got factories that are lying empty, that derelict, that are being abandoned. Within the next month or so, I'm going to be commissioning the study by one of the universities. We want them to really do us a study of all these factories, because we want to, when the time we take over, we must immediately offer them to the private sector. I want to come to the British Chamber and says to you guys, here's the factories, here's the study of all the factories throughout the country. Give us a proposal. We want you to go and set up a factory in this area. On the basis of this, we're prepared to really give you incentives. You can have this factory for the next 50, 60 years. You don't have to pay rental, including not even paying taxes for X amount of years, depending on how much you're going to invest. And one thing that I can assure the British businessmen and women, why I will have red carpet for them, because our party is not going to be related to any labor organization. Labor organization we respect. We want it to be there to protect the vulnerable people. But we will treat the labor like we treat the religious organization or any other organization. They are not going to have any veto on our economic policies. Our economic policies are going to be there for the employed, unemployed, vulnerable, and so forth. Whereas over the last 26 years, labor has been dominant and destruction of our economy. And it is for that reason it's one thing that I want them to really know. This morning I was interviewed by one of the papers, as specifically calling me regarding what COSATU is saying about my statement. I said, go and tell them it is a fact. They will not have a veto on our economic policies. But we will work with them, like we'll work with everybody else. They're not going to get any preferential treatment, because at the end of the day, as government, we are not the government of the few. We're government of all South Africans. And we want the businesses to operate and give them incentive, employ our people so that our people can have the dignity. You can't expect people who are unemployed, who are unable to feed their families, to have the dignity. That's why this breakdown of the click stores and so forth, and people saying you want to give people dignity. How do you give people dignity? By subjecting them to poverty. Poverty cannot give anyone dignity.
Herman, I'm going to come back to those very important points, which are core values to you in the creation of your organization. From a British perspective, and I think Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner Emma Wade-Smith is on the call, in the post-Brexit context, we've been really committed to bringing trade, foreign direct investment into South Africa. So anything that eases that is good news to the British investment community. I'm going to move off some of the strategic questions that you and I are on, and I'll come back to them at the end and explore some of your influences. I'd like to kind of just ask and respond to some of our members' questions, and I'll invite Cecilia to join us in a few moments. But Maketsi Sebeko from Immigration Management Expat Web. Hi Mo, good to see you again. I think we first met in the ActionSA Green Room before we were going on TV. Great to have your questions. Maketsi runs an immigration organization, and he's asking, what is ActionSA's immigration policy and position on open borders in Africa? Perhaps quite interesting in the context of the African Free Trade Agreement. And where do you see the current shortfalls in the current immigration system? So a couple of questions in there that perhaps you could respond to.
Okay, this is the question that Leon, that South Africans and some commentators, for some reason, they think South Africa is the test ground to a test case to operate a country without borders and without having any laws. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen in South Africa for as long as I'm around. South Africa, it's a sovereign country with borders. And because a country without borders is not a country. Our immigration policies are clearly defined within our constitution. Our constitution says anyone can come to South Africa. But two things that we expect South Africans to do, I mean, people of the world to do. Because one thing that we must never forget, this country for the last 140 odd years or so was built at the back of migrants. And the trade relations, very crucial. You can't really operate as an island. But at the end of the day, you've got to maintain your status as a sovereign state. People must come into your country legally, and when they're here, must respect our laws. Anything outside that is not negotiable, it's not, I'm not even prepared to really entertain, where anyone would really say South Africa must be a free-for-all. That it is not even a thing that we'd like to really entertain. Free trade with African countries, we'd like to operate with the entire African continent and the world. But at the end of the day, our borders must be protected, allow and encourage and invite people of the world, including anyone, to really come into this country, but they must come here legally, and when they are here, they must respect our laws.
That's very clear, and I think a lot of people would support that view. What I hear a lot of businesses saying that is a handbrake on their growth and their development is the access to certain skill sets, particularly foreign direct investors coming in with new technologies, people that understand their culture. They want to bring them into the organization to help them grow and create jobs, but then the visas are blocked. It takes 9 months, 2 years. Their spouses can't get visas. One child's allowed access, but not the other. And in the end, these skilled people that are going to invest and employ people end up not coming. What's your view on skilled migration and also migration for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think this problem was created by us, by our current government. I think, Leon, just to really give you an example. How did the Guptas get their visas? Their South African citizenship, not even their visas. You see, when you have corruption as part of your institutional framework, you've got a huge challenge where you now discourage those who want to do business properly, but those who are coming here for corrupt and criminal reasons, they are the ones who get the preference. That has to stop, and there has to really be consequences. It is for that reason, for us as ActionSA, I can tell you, when you take over national government, our first priority is going to be the re-establishment of the Scorpions, an independent criminal justice system that is not answerable to any politician. So that if ever there's any element of law breaking, be you've broken a glass or you've stolen public monies, you've got to really face the might of the law. Unfortunately, in our country right now, what has created a problem for us, to bringing skills into this country. In fact, South Africa, we're so unfortunate that we did not just really lose the international skill. You know, the last 26 years, you know how much skill we've lost of our own people, trained here by South Africans, are today some of the best in the world. They are doing such great work for the world. South Africa lost. In fact, my own daughter, who only arrived here 2 weeks ago, to studied and worked in the state, she was refusing to come back home. I had to fortunate enough in December, she was home and I was here for 3 weeks. And I said to her, my girl, please, you can't expect us as a family to have invested for the Americans. I know with your education, you can get a job. You won't be without a job in the United States. But unfortunately, you've got to come and help us here. So now can imagine, even I've got a practical example. My own daughter, she was stuck for the last 2 months, couldn't get a flight. She's here to come and work with her mom to assist in the business, because I'm not going back to business. I'm now full-time with ActionSA to save South Africa. And I said, baby girl, come back and really be here at home with us, because you can be in America, you can be in Britain, you can be anywhere in the world. You've got the right educational qualification that would qualify you to be anywhere in the world, but you're always going to be judged on your own country of birth. And I said, you have the responsibility to come back. So what we need to do, the only way I can tell you we can rebuild this country, more especially after 26 years of failure, where I said to you, 80% of public schools in this country are dysfunctional. We are producing the workforce that is not employable. So the only way we can rebuild this fake industrial areas I'm talking about, that basically means that we've got to allow you to really bring the skills to train our people over the next 15, 20 years, because our people are not certain technical jobs that they cannot really, unfortunately, operate. So as part of obviously giving an incentive, we've got to allow you to really bring in people who can run your business, because we are not expecting you to bring charity. We don't want charity. What I'm talking about with this in the opening up of these industries throughout the country, I don't need any favors from anyone in South Africa. We're not honestly asking anybody for a favor. What we're going to do, we are going to make it impossible for you as a serious businessman to refuse coming to put up your factory in South Africa, because there's no country in the world where you can have this infrastructure and not really be able to get a tax holiday. We'll make it difficult.
Yeah. So free trade zones, special economic zones, and trade versus aid, to coin a British phrase. And moving on, Herman, that's a thorough explanation, and I think, Mo, it would be great to get your comments to see how you've taken that answer. Sean Godoy is actually a colleague of mine from the South African Chamber of Commerce in London, has a property business here, and he was wondering, what have you learned from your experiences of running Joburg as the mayor that you would bring into running your party and potentially a run for the presidency? What were those learnings and what would you implement?
Well, it was a really very traumatic experience. I think for me, going to work every morning basically was like going to war, running government with no political experience, but I had human experience. Seven-way coalition arrangement with the EFF voting with us on an issue-by-issue basis. So going to work for me, and then on the other hand, we had the ANC that was determined to collapse my government. On a daily basis, I had to deal with what I call snakes. Every day I had to kill the snakes that were there to destabilize us. But at the same time, Leon, for me, that privilege was one of the most rewarding. I honestly and truly believe I'm one of the luckiest human beings on earth. I look at my upbringing in poverty. I look at age of 22, starting my business career by the my own standards. And then when it's time for me to retire, man, I just turned 61 last week, so I'm not a young man. And when I'm supposed to retire, then I get an opportunity to serve my country. Yeah. I think it is really something that for me it's enriching. What was the challenge was, Leon, the level and intensity of the patronage network in our government. It's not in the politicians. They put it in the government itself. You remember, for you to run a successful democratic country and a successful one, you need to make sure that the public service is professional. They must serve whatever political party elected by the people. Whereas in our case, the whole system is infected with patronage network. So we've got to remove that as a matter of agency. I did it the first time around, but I can tell you with experience that I've got, and it'll be part of the message that I'm going to be sending to South Africans, that when we take over, we're going to remove this patronage network, put in the right people to run our government, because that's the only way that we can serve business and serve society.
So that triggers two questions that are coming from our members, but equally from myself. One is around the culture of leadership that you inculcate. So I know you spoke about servant leadership, and you're in a position whereby you can give back to your country. If we get rid of people that are operating under patronage, we still need to bring in effective, well-trained bureaucrats, because civil servants run a country, they enable it. How can we quickly maneuver and transition whilst necessarily removing people that we don't want, but still engage? Because I'm sure there are good public-spirited servants in there that with training and inspiration will adapt, and maybe we can attract people quickly in, but that takes time and quite a level of management. Do you have a plan how you would affect that transition quickly?
Yeah, fortunate enough with the experience of the city of Johannesburg, you've got probably the third layer of government very frustrated, and this are experienced people. Obviously, they are sidelined because obviously they're not politically connected, or they are refusing to cooperate in corrupt activity, because one of the tragedy of what I uncovered in the city of Johannesburg was the epicenter of corruption by the Guptas. The city of Joburg was an epicenter of corruption. So there are people who are still in government today because they're looking for jobs, highly trained, but they're sidelined. They're not at a senior level. So it is possible to identify those people. And what I'm going to do, the first time around when I took over the city of Johannesburg, I did the skills audit after taking over. This time around, with all the municipalities we're going to contest, we have to invest in doing skills audit beforehand, so that I know the snakes beforehand, and I can identify people who are experienced but were sidelined, because that's the only way that you can quickly really address this matter. And we're going to address it that way. I can tell you the second and third layer of the administration. These are experienced people, sidelined. Some of them have left the private sector. We've got to invite them back. More especially a lot of white people who left the private sector and are unemployed, and they're still young. They're still in their 50s, 60s. They can still work. We've got to bring them back into public service to assist us in turning this country around. So we're going to really do that, and we're going to be unapologetic about this, because by bringing skills into this, we'll be helping the broader society.
Yeah, Herman, that's a lovely message to hear, that there are principled, talented people that just need the opportunity and the right framework to operate in. And there are people that have previously been excluded along racial lines that you're going to invite back into the workforce. These people are proud South Africans that still want to contribute. At this moment, perhaps I can invite our Vice President, my colleague Cecilia, to join us. Cecilia has been engaging with our members. A few questions are streaming in. Cecilia, would you like to take the floor?
Hi. Yes, Leon. I've got a few questions from people coming in. I think what I'm going to do first is read something from Joanne Polzer. It does speak to, I think, what a lot of South Africans are feeling, but people possibly globally. There's a big suspicion, mistrust, and disillusionment with governments and promises being made that we've seen over the past few decades. And this goes very deep into our rural communities as well. So Joanne is saying, as a member from the Eersterus community, we've gone from an ANC ward to a DA ward, still with the lack of service delivery. We've recently had protests over illegal housing as well, and no senior government representative came close to ask what they could do. How will ActionSA be different to ensure service delivery is provided and that housing does become available? And there are, of course, more issues, but this is one that is quite center and close to the heart of many of our rural communities.
Cecilia, if I may answer that question, obviously I've already addressed it. And I think it's important to keep reminding people about our commitment to public service. That Joanne, obviously, that public rep or the councillor or whoever is in the area was imposed on them. There is not the community that decided the person who must actually represent them. It is for that reason we're going to really go for primaries, for the community in each ward. They are the ones who must actually ensure that they give us the best talent in the community, someone who loves the community. Because, you know, public service is not just a job, it's a calling. It's like really being a pastor or a teacher or a policeman. These are not ordinary jobs. These are jobs for a calling. You don't go into a public service because you want to make money. No, you go into public service because you want to serve society. If that's a case, if you're coming into public service because you want to make money, then the system is going to collapse. That's why we want the community to really be the one to hold the people accountable. In the event that there's no delivery, then they can, this person is actually failing us. You know, if I can tell you, if I have my way, for this democracy to operate like they do in Australia, I would actually make it compulsory, obligatory for people to vote. Because that's the only way you can get democracy to work. Let us all take the responsibility. It's well and good for you to complain at dinner parties, but you're not really prepared to hold politicians accountable. If I have my way, I still have years to live. One of the things I'm going to really press in as part of our constitutional framework, making the voting compulsory and a criminal act in the event you don't vote. Because you're not just really failing yourself, you're failing the rest of the society, because politicians can only perform when they know that society is watching them, that the society are the bosses. But when they know that you don't vote, like right now, it suits our government well when they know they can govern the voting population of 27 million with only 9 million voters. I mean, is this democracy? So, and who's allowed this? People who did not vote. We've got to really educate them in the beginning stages. But if I had my way, I would obviously really make it compulsory. Because imagine if the 17 million people had voted, the politicians would today be respecting civil society.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Herman. That is a very good point. The people have to hold government accountable. Absolutely agree with you. But then also government cannot ignore people when society attempts to do that. And I think it sort of brings me to a next point. I've had a few questions from Robert Null coming in. It's around the partnership between business and government, which from everything you've said, it seems like that is quite a priority for you, or would be. And what can we actually do to make that a more workable win-win situation? I think there's a lot to be gained from it, and problems that government can't fix, the easy solution is business can fix it, but will government let business fix it? And I think there's a big pushback that we've been experiencing as business from that side. An example also Terence Naidu is asking, what steps would you take to implement greater levels of technology adoption into the public sector? In what specific area of government would you look to adopt more technology, and why?
Look, I think, Cecilia, the question of business investing in a country, it's not something that happens because you've got AK-47 against the business community or the investment community. If you want people to invest in your country, that's when you put in the right environment for them to invest. Let me give you a practical example what really broke my heart some years ago when I was still in business. That's when I realized my country's in trouble. There was one particular company looking for a BE partner, and I was approached for some reason to be their partner. Went to have a look at this business, and I had one of my partners who has had the necessary skill in this business. I looked at it. At the time when I needed to really buy, I think about 30-35% of the business, what they expected me to pay at the time was about 140 million rands. And then obviously with my team, we went, interrogated the numbers, and after a few months, we agreed on 100 million rands for my shareholding. And they needed someone with money because they wanted capital injection in the mining industry. It's not something that you invest today and then you get you see the profits in 5 years. It's a long-term investment. 100 million, I was happy. But I can tell you a few days later, I had to call my lawyers. I said, no, guys, I like this business. I like these partners. I know it's a good deal. Unfortunately, it's of a long-term nature. And I don't trust South Africa. I'm not prepared to put 100 million rands of my money here. Because if I look at DMR and how every year they're changing legislation, particularly in respect of BE, I said, you know what? I'm not. I said, I have to ask my lawyers to go and really apologize to these guys for really taking their time. But when I looked at the only time we'll make money out of business, we'll start seeing returns out of this money, like in 5 years. Within the first 5 years, you're not going to see any cent out of this. But then I said to myself, no ways, I can't invest 100 million rands in South Africa under the current government. Now you can imagine a black South African being scared to put in his money into his own country.
Yeah.
This is not a movie. It is real. I've spoken about this so many times. That now can imagine, how do I expect a British or American or a Chinese or whatever to come in and invest in such a hostile environment? And that's something that for me breaks my heart to say, my goodness, look at the unemployed. Every time the Stats SA releases the numbers, we are going up, we're going south as far as the numbers are concerned. On the other hand, we've got people, including us as South African businesses, we cannot invest in this environment because it is so toxic. So obviously as a businessman, I know the only way I can attract people to come and invest in this country, I've got to have a red carpet for them. That's why I don't want them to come and do us favors, because when people come and do you favors, you owe them something. Because I don't need anyone to do me a favor, because I won't do any favor to anyone. It must be a win-win situation. And a win-win situation is that this country is sitting with billions of factories that are lying empty, 30, 40 years old. They are lying empty. They are being vandalized, and not just in Joe, throughout the whole country. So I'm saying is, this is the asset that we as government can obviously put into the market. Well, next time when I address you as the president of the country with my team of our experts to say, guys, fight for this. Here's a piece of, here's a factory. You can have us, tell us how much you want it, how many years you want it tax-free, how many years we are prepared to, over and above not paying for this, we will give you tax incentives, so that you can employ our people, train them to really be able to one day be able to feed themselves and their families and grow. So these are things that one does not have to really be a rocket scientist to figure out. And the thing is, the infrastructure in this country is already there. Unlike other countries where you have to go and establish. Yes, the infrastructure is there, it's abundant, it's not being used for the last 20, 30 years, and our government doesn't care. In fact, they're closing even the few that are still there. So I see a huge opportunity, and I can tell you I've consulted a lot of South Africans, particularly the working class, who lost their jobs in the new South Africa because COSATU promising them to close down factories. And now they see how the COSATU leadership is enjoying the fruits of this labor, of their labor. They've lost their jobs 10, 15 years. People have not really worked. That's why COSATU today has got no credibility with the working class. So we have got, instead of talking to COSATU, I'd rather go and talk to people of Harangua or people of Toto who are unemployed today. Have a meeting with them to really show them, I've got a British company or I've got a Sandton-based company that's coming to invest in Toto. But at the end of the day, you're going to be able to wake up every morning, go to work, you can walk to work. End of the week or end of the month, you'll be able to provide for your family. You can be a man again. You can be a woman, a mother again, instead of really dependent on the state that is actually exploiting you. So that's why, for me, this project is really so crucial. And fortunate enough, I'm confident that South Africans will be well behind this, because it is in their interest. It's not in my interest. I've got, as a person, I've got nothing to gain. But it is about really making South Africa a manufacturing hub of the world.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Herman. I think you've given a lot of insight, particularly on your policy when it comes to labor laws and where you stand on that. You've also, through this answer, touched on two other questions around policy that I've had. Gary Davies touched on that. But others too, I think we'd really like to know, what is your stance and what will be your policy when it comes to Black economic empowerment, tying in with labor relations, but also property rights and distribution of land. This also, of course, has huge effect on foreign direct investment, but it also has an effect on people who live within this country and are South Africans to want to and can contribute, but are also hampered by some of these policies and laws. What is your stance on that?
Well, I think let me start with Terrence's question on technology. I don't really believe today there's any business that doesn't need technological advancement. Whether you manufacture bricks or you manufacture cars, or you're a farmer, technology today it's needed in every aspect. We're not going to say we will invest technology in one area. Technology, without it, you can't really operate today. So every aspect of our economic advancement is going to be supported by technology. Otherwise, we are not going to really be able to really compete with the world. In terms of property rights, I mean, I'm sure South Africans are very aware about my support for the current constitutional framework on land restitution. We don't need to change our constitution to really be able to have compensation of land. This government of South Africa has got so much land. And some of the land is actually owned by the private sector that are not really using. The constitution allows. You know, when I was a mayor of the city of Johannesburg, I don't know if you are aware, we expropriated the properties which were abandoned and stuff like that, and offer them to the private sector to build affordable accommodation for our people. We did not need amendment of our constitution. You know, the first time in my life to appear in court, in a court of law, and I insisted, my senior counsel, I was the mayor, senior counsel for the city wanted to go and represent, and I said, no, I want you to be the one to give the opening remarks to the judge. There was a piece of land that someone bought working with corrupt officials. Land already occupied by people who hijacked, it was already a hijacked piece of land. This guy bought this piece of land, I think about 3 million rands. And then the city at the time when we took over was just about to pay this person 14 million rands to buy it from them. And this matter was going to go to court. And I said, I'm happy to go to court. And I said, I'm not paying 14 million rands of public money for this. Convinced my senior counsel for me to go and make my own presentation. Yes, I'll have the lawyers to present, but I said, let me go and actually get our judges to understand the challenge. Because I demonstrated to them the housing backlog in the city of Johannesburg and who are the biggest casualties of this housing backlog. Here's a piece of land and property that this person bought, already hijacked. And how do you expect me? I must pay the 40 million rents. I said, my owner, I'm happy if I'm forced to buy this piece of land. I'm prepared to really give him what he paid. But anything more than that, I'm not prepared. And at the time, I was with Paul Mashatile, who was the MEC of Kokta in the city of Joburg. Both of us were in court. He didn't speak. I spoke on behalf of the city. And because in this particular case, the province was the one to pay out of the grants to come to the city of Joburg. I refused. The province was prepared to pay, and I refused. I said, no, we're not going to really pay this. So right now, what these people are articulating, particularly the EFF and the ANC, around taking land without compensation. You know what that it means? You know, like right now, I'm in my house, I've owned this property and the land. They are saying, no, the land must belong to the state, and I can build on top of this, but the land belongs. This is not going to happen under our watch. I think the property rights are fundamental for any democracy, for any wealth creation, for any society. That's why when I took over the city of Johannesburg, I issued over 8,000 title deeds, more than what all ANC municipalities combined throughout the country in 22 years, in just over 3 years, because I wanted our people to own land. That people are talking about people owning land, but the Constitution allows them to give people in the townships, give them the title to the properties. I issued out more title deeds than all the municipalities of ANC combined in 22 years. I did it in 3 years. So property rights is really crucial. When it comes to BE, I've already clarified. The ANC BE belongs to the archives of our history. That system has not worked, and there's just no way it's going to work. But what we need is, we need an inclusive economy. How you create an inclusive economy? Use the carrot approach, where you encourage businesses for integration and so forth. And we will release those carrots as we get closer to the time. I'm still consulting, because I think our party is based on consultation with civil society. And people agree with us that NCB, we've got to go and bury it in this with this 1.5 million graves that they were built, they were digging for us. That's where we will go and bury some of their policies and come out with policies that can work for South Africans.
Thanks, Herman. Thank you, Cecilia, as well. And please, to the members, please keep your questions coming in, and we'll feed them in. You mentioned a very interesting concept around the constitutionally making it obligatory legal to vote. And I think we would like to run a poll with our members right now, just to see what our views are on whether we are in favour of compulsory voting. You answered a lot of questions there, touching on property rights, touching on Black economic empowerment. Candice Watson, who's from AECI, has asked about the economic impact of COVID and the thousands of jobs that are lost, and in terms of what measures could the government put in place to stimulate economic growth. I think you've touched on that in some ways, and perhaps we can explore that. For me, there are some broader questions I want to come back to, but I suppose some of the tactical questions that we still want to understand are your movement. You talk about the 19 million that haven't voted. There is a fractured, and this comes from Justin Farnell, CEO and founder of Wi-Fi on the Move, a fractured opposition. And we can name names, we can look at the DA, we can look at the other 50 parties. How are we going to mobilize, or how do you intend to mobilize your organization, the existing opposition parties, and indeed those people that are just disenfranchised by choice? And that'll be interesting to see around what the audience thinks around compulsory voting. So a few questions there really around political tactics to navigate the current context before you're in a position to change the constitution.
I think, Leon, this whole issue of people expecting the consolidation of existing political parties, unless someone wants me to land in a mental institution.
Okay.
And I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to deliberately derail my mind. I think, as a human species, we're lucky God gave us this little brain to use to navigate.
Yeah.
But a lot of, if not all the political parties in our current system, they're stomach politics. People are in politics for wrong reasons, because obviously it went into politics because they were looking for a job, looking for opportunities, or looking for corruption opportunities. So that is why I'm not prepared to really waste my time. So you can imagine, ever since the last 8 months, we're starting with the People's Dialogue, they started getting advances, even up to today, the smaller parties wanting to join up with us. We're not a party of celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
We're a party of public servants. And I think for me, as a founder and as a leader, I have to really walk the talk and really demonstrate my commitment to public service. And anyone wanting to join me, they're most welcome. And we want them. We want South Africans. But at the end of the day, this is not, we're not an employment agency. Firstly, people must understand, we're not an employment agency. If you are not really prepared to really serve society and demonstrate that you want to serve society, go somewhere else. Right now, I think for me, low-hanging fruits. I know it obviously over many years of business in the cosmetic industry. It's about the strategy when you run business. And the very same applies in politics. Why worry about the 10 million ANC voters when I've got 19 million South Africans? And these are people that cannot be bought by food parcels or T-shirts, or they will never you'll never see them in a stadium, or they're being bused to a stadium. There's 19 million people, we've really engaged them. These are not people, these are bright people, middle class, who are concerned. And not that they're not concerned, it is just that they do not have an alternative. The reason why they gave up on voting wasn't because they're not interested in the future of the country. It is because no political party actually offered them the reason to vote. So we've got to engage them even much more deeper the next 2 months. That's why we're looking for volunteers. We're looking for resources to be able to talk to this 19 million people. Because while we're talking to this 19 million people, all the other parties are losing. I can give you just quick stats. 2009, ANC received 69%. 2014 received 62%. Last year with Ramaphosa received 57%. So this is a dying political party. Why must I worry about this? They are dying anyway, natural death. Well, even if ActionSA was not there, they are dying anyway. And also they're a rural party. And the 19 million people I'm talking about, these are urban areas. That's why they're not in the metros. You look at all the metros, the only metro that insists upon is eThekwini. Moving from the 70%, now sitting at 55%. Come the next local government election, even if we are not going to be there ourselves in eThekwini, I can tell you ANC is going to be under 50%. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I'm going to fish where there's fish. I'm not going to go and fish I'm not going to go and fish in the desert.
That's a very fascinating response and a study of psephology. And I think we can look at some examples of where people have used that not for noble measures. And well, I'll be controversial as a Brit and say I was a pro-European. The Brexit vote was because there's a large disenfranchised part of the electorate that were not engaged by any party, and Cambridge Analytica accessed them. We could say the same for Trump. So given this disenfranchisement, it's also a space for darkness where instead of light. And just welcome your views on, are we going to leave a leadership vacuum if noble leaders don't step forward and seize that opportunity for the disenfranchised?
Yeah, well, I think it is for us as ActionSA, we take this to really be a huge, huge, huge opportunity. And I think if I look at our of the 60,000 volunteers. Of the 2.4 million people who gave us the mandate, a big percentage of them are people who have never bothered to vote. Some of them had already given up. But these are the people who engaged us, are really prepared to really consider. And you can imagine now with us now as a party unfolding, we every day attracting more and more South Africans. Actually, as of today, we've been having some glitches with our online registration, and my team just before we started this the webinar were telling me they've got everything ready. If you go into all my social media platforms, we are already actually pushing online registration, and our registration is free. We don't charge people. You get your membership with your code, and so forth. So that we encourage South Africans to take ownership of the country. That guys, we failed our country by saying we're not interested. So we're now getting more and more people interested in actually taking responsibility. You can be a judge of a high court. You don't have to openly declare who you're voting for, but you can become a member of our party. And the reason why I always, in my communication, asking South Africans to take over the responsibility, take power from the politicians, is because right now there are so many constitutional flaws that ANC is undermining. And you're going to see a lot of court cases that I'm going to embark upon, including private prosecution. All these politicians who've stolen public monies, even long before we free up our criminal justice system, we are going to pursue private prosecution. And for us to really be able to really succeed in this, it's what we want when we go to court. We can demonstrate to the judge and our highest court to say we represent 10 million or 15 million South Africans are behind us. This is the mandate from the people, because that is how we're going to really be engaged in society. That you don't have to really be in the political office to play a role. You can be a member of civil society, but take the responsibility for directing the future of your country.
Thanks, Herman. I think it's a great opportunity to look at the results of the poll now, and just to see. I'm intrigued to see what our members think about compulsory voting. Wow. Well, I think any party would be pleased with that result at the polls. 70% of us believe in compulsory voting. So we are a very engaged, action-orientated citizenry and business community. Thank you, everybody. I think Cecilia's got a question or two more. Then I'm going to start concluding with some questions. Maybe talk about Arsenal versus Manchester United a little bit and your links with the UK and some of your, perhaps, your vision. But Cecilia, anything else from our members before we move on to the concluding part of the session?
I think there's one that I'd actually really like to hear your answer on this. And this is from what you've learned. You went from being a businessman, and particularly, it's a great story when you were technically, under law, not allowed to have a business, and you did it anyway, and you won. And that is a great story. I'm thinking then, coming from that entrepreneurial background, what lessons did you learn when you entered politics, first with the DA and then running the city of Joburg as its mayor? What did you learn about the difference in a game of politics versus a game of business? It sometimes reminds me of, we all know it's a well-known business case of Nokia, who failed, and the CEO breaking down and saying, we did nothing wrong, but still we lost. So how do you do nothing wrong and you can still lose? Or how do you do even a few things wrong and win? What are some of the key lessons that you've learned over the past 5 to 10 years?
Celia, obviously I've been in politics for 4 years. Now running for 5 years because of obviously 2016, that's when I went out to campaign and took over the mayorship on the 22nd of August 2016 and resigned on the 21st of October last year, finishing my last job in office was the 27th of November last year, and then immediately embarked on the People's Dialogue that gave birth to ActionSA. So it's rough, just under 5 years being directly in politics. and I can really want to share it with the business community. You guys are lucky. You are on holiday. Business and politics. This game. This is not. If you honestly, if you don't want a tough life, go into business. If you want peace in your life, you want to enjoy life, be with your family, and go on holidays as and when, and make money, lots and lots of money, go into business. But if you want a nightmare, come into public office. This is a punishing job.
Yeah.
It's a punishing job, but at the same time, it's a rewarding job. More especially, I think for someone like me, I think I can't speak for majority of people who we expect them to save when they don't really have anything to fall back on. Like, I mean, you can imagine launching this People's Dialogue. I had my family to support me. I don't earn a salary, but I've got a big staff that I've got to every month make sure that people get paid and so forth. So I've got my wife looking after me, and I don't really intend taking a salary until we go into government. But my family is committed in ensuring that this project becomes realizable. We've got to really get there. So politics is not really for sissies. It's a very expensive businessmen, when they want to spoil themselves, they'll go and buy Lamborghini or go and buy a yacht. The money that I've already spent the last 8 months, I'll probably have bought one of the biggest yachts when put it in the Greek islands. So that's what
I must say though, it's arguably, I think some people in government have bought yachts, but perhaps not through a credible or legal ways. But that's I think politics is hard if you're an honest business person entering politics. That is where the big difference comes in.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying is the politics, because you wanted to know from me the difference between the two. I'm saying is the politics, it's a hard game. It's an environment where we need to change the mindset of public service servants. I don't know about other countries. I can talk about here over the last 26 years how the current government has corrupted the minds of public servants because they think they're doing people a favor. And that's something that I've got to eradicate the next 15, 20 years to change the mindset of people working for government to understand that they've been given a privilege by society to serve them. When someone goes to any government office, you must kneel down. When you see a resident or a member of community coming into government offices, you've got to treat them like you're treating your boss in a business environment, because this community is actually our bosses. They're the ones who must actually decide who must govern. But right now, we created a situation in this country where going to any government offices in this country, how we get abused by officials. They literally abuse us, and you've got nowhere to go. The higher you go, the more difficult it gets. So you end up actually to civil society, the bosses, actually kneeling down on getting service. That's why they end up corrupt with the corruption and so forth, to get into the queue, because nobody cares that drinking tea. I mean, in the morning before they start working, already drinking tea with fed cookies. They eat one.
Yeah. No, Herman, thank you for that. I think Cecilia, is that all our questions from our members for now?
I think Herman has actually covered most of what our members have been asking. Is there one or two more that you've got on your side here?
I've got some observations that I think are semi-controversial. And interestingly, we were speaking to Maletzio and Becky last week, Cecilia and I, about BE. And he actually studied in the UK at my own varsity. And I'm a South African resident. I've been here now 8 years, and I want to stay here and be part of the future. I sometimes feel I'm excluded from the debates. And I know my members feel this, and particularly the investors. And I want to be their voice. We want to be their voice to say, yes, we are guests in your country, but we want to bring stuff to it. And we have observations. I think if we look at post-conflict societies, Singapore, Germany, East and West Germany, there are lessons that we can learn to accelerate the development. And if we compare ourselves as a country on any index, and let's look at other African countries. I have, my grandfather's a Nigerian immigrant to the UK after the war. Let's compare other African countries. Why are we not accelerating on the Human Development Index on any metric compared to post-conflict Asian countries, post-conflict European countries? And perhaps a brief answer on that, and then I will conclude with why I'm here and why I believe in this country and why I believe in the people and business of this country. But that's quite it's a difficult question to raise, and one that I would not be raised. I'd raise that at a private dinner party, but this is the environment and vibe we've got in our membership.
Leon, it's not a difficult question. It just requires honesty and in dealing with this matter. If you look at the independence of Africa from the late 50s, South Africa being the last country to get their own independence. Unfortunately, when these countries received their independence from mainly Britain, to some extent French, Portuguese, and the Spanish, but obviously mainly the Britain. Unfortunately, at the time, you must understand, when the Russians, the Communist Party took over power in 1917, and in 1924 with that evil human being called Stalin came over, started identifying African countries as a potential target. And they were vulnerable because they were coming from a colonized kind of environment, and communism on paper. I mean, what Karl Marx wrote in that piece of in that book, it's such a beautiful system on paper. Who would not fall for this? That's why if you want to find communists, you find them at universities anywhere in the world. Because when people are vulnerable at universities, they don't have the practical life. Communism would appeal to anyone who's not really experienced the real life, So unfortunately, majority of those countries became victims of the communist propaganda. And unfortunately, the communist environment, as you were aware, never worked even where it was born in Russia. How would it ever work in Africa? That system cannot really work. So so you ended up with coup after coup, no stability. There was never any stability in Africa since the advent of the independence. For me, two countries that I admire in the entire African continent so far, it's Botswana and Rwanda. I remember going into Botswana my first visit to Botswana in 1983. I was a salesman selling stuff from the boot of my car, going from salon to salon, collecting the cash. Gaborone, the whole of Gaborone in 1983 only had one traffic light. Only one traffic light. So over the last 38 years or so, I've seen that 38 or 40 years, I've actually experienced that country's growth. I go to Gaborone today, I get lost. Totally get lost. And to think I used to be in the Gaborone and Lubasi every single month. I used to drive in the 80s. I used to do 10,000 kilometers a month. That's how far I used to really drive. A car with no aircon. I did not have an aircon, no power steering, but I used to travel a lot. So Botswana, I've seen how a country can actually develop, and it has, and I hope and I pray for them that they continue on that trajectory. But the latest one, which I think for me, it's a miracle, it's Rwanda. I think I've got such high admiration for Paul Kagame and his team. I mean, my wife and I went on a tour of that country before I even thought I was going to public office. Still a businessman. I like experiencing, and would go on a tour of a country. The two of us organized from here, 4x4 with a driver, picked us up at the airport, spent one night in Kigali, and then went around that country over 7 days. And I went back again 2 years ago, and I can tell, and I've read quite a lot about that country before. The reason why I went, it was reading about the genocide and so forth. And I can tell you that country, looking at it in Singapore, because I've also been many times in Singapore. I've read books on Lee Kuan Yew. He's one of the most, it's an outstanding human being. Lee Kuan Yew, for me, he was an extraordinary man. And I see Paul Kagame following on his footsteps, and I really pray and hope that he keeps on that tightrope. That country comes from a difficult distance, but you look at what he's doing for that country, it's another miracle.
And Herman, thank you. We got some recent insights of working with the former Minister for Trade for Botswana and the former Minister for Telecommunications in Rwanda. And what we found interesting was the global approach to education. So going away and receiving world-class education, then coming back and transferring that knowledge, and actually coming from Harvard to give public service before going into McKinsey. So we have examples, obviously Singapore, we have examples, our neighbors on the continent. Perhaps another one we can debate around democracy being the least worst form of government, to quote Churchill, because Kagame did redefine the constitution for a third term, but let's not go down there. I think it's an excellent example of what can be done quickly in a post-conflict environment. I think using the football analogy, you were an Arsenal fan, I'm a Manchester United fan. They're very local. And what I love about them, they bring talent from all around the world behind one badge, behind one flag to achieve a common goal. And I've seen those pockets of excellence here in South Africa, in my son's schools and varsities, in businesses and entrepreneurs. And I feel as a business community that we represent here at the British Chamber, that is what we want to do. We want to come together as business, celebrate excellence. We don't really want to criticize, we want to act, and we want to contribute to a problem. And I think that, for me, is with all the problems and challenges you've outlined, there are people like me and our members that we believe in South Africa. We believe in the talent here, and we believe in the opportunity and resources here. And we want to support leaders across all parties, all Chapter 11 institutions, and all businesses that are calling for action and a can-do attitude. So again, in the spirit of our chamber and our values, is we believe in sustainable capitalism. As we grow our businesses, we want to grow the societies to which we serve. And something you've articulated is around servant leadership. And if we have that servant leadership and humility at every level of our country, governmental, municipal, in business, in communities, we're probably going to make strides forward. Mr. Mashaba, it has been an honor to host you. Thank you so much for making yourself available to our members. Just so all the members know, we didn't give Herman any of the questions in advance. He said freestyle. I think your words were, we're at your mercy. We would like to maintain a strong dialogue with you to share our experiences with you. And we will support your call for action. We will support any party's call for action who is creating a better business environment so we can grow our businesses and really address some of these social and economic challenges that are epidemics in themselves in our country. But I offer you any closing comments. Before so, I would love to thank my Vice President Cecilia, Ema in Mission Control, Leslie and Venice in the background, making sure in the right place at the right time, and your team, Herman, for making you available. Thank you for your transparency, honesty, and we wish you all the very best of luck.
Thank you so much, Leon, Cecilia, and all your members for this privilege, because it's a privilege what you've given me to talk to your members, not something that we take for granted. And the reason why I take it as a privilege, because I can tell you, we as South Africans, we need you more than what you need us. We know we've got a lovely country. I would not want to go and live in London or anywhere in England, but I love to go to England, lots of entertainment, great country, but I would not want to go and live there because of the weather conditions. The people are great. Because of your weather, in and out, I love your country, but I love your money more. And the reason why I've accepted this invitation, and I don't take it for granted, And I wanted us to have this robust, brutal discussions because as South Africa, we desperately need your money. And the only way we can get you to spend your money here, we've got to really make it attractive for you. And we recognize that, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Well, again, we stay here despite the challenges because we see the opportunities, and in many ways we've fallen in love with this country and our adopted home. We equally represent many South African businesses that want to use the strength of the British government and our influence to try and influence policy, but also advise them in terms of growth. So, yep, England, beautiful country. I prefer the weather here. The wine's pretty good here too, better than in the UK. The soccer's better back home. The rugby, that's up for debate for another time. We're still a bit bruised. But again, thank you to all our members for joining. Please stay engaged. If you have more questions, chamber members, reach out to us. We're going to stay in touch with Herman. We'll be in regular dialogue. And I wish everybody all the very best. I feel the economy is starting to move a little bit quicker than it was. So we all need to grind that a little bit harder to make sure we can contribute to regrowing our economy. Mr. Mashaba, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good night. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.